What is up, everyone? So today I'm going to show you how I upgraded my DeLonghi espresso machine with a new portafilter, open basket, the price point that came in at, and then upgrading the steam one and kind of the headache if you decide to tackle that project. And the differences between the all black plastic version and the stainless version for the internals of the steam one and what to look out for. We will also discuss how to upgrade your portafilter setup, the basket and everything on your stock one if for whatever reason you're not getting a good extraction and you don't want to replace it with the open basket design. So let's get into this video and see what it's all about. So to grind up my beans, what I picked up was this Fridge Air 300 watt smoothie maker, just because I like that it comes with a mason jar that's glass, and you could use not the wide mouth but the regular mason jars to replace this. And it also comes with this smoothie drink holder if you wanted to use that. The reason why I didn't go with buying a actual grinder is because I want something that's more universal. This has that retro look, so it's pretty nice, and it was only $39 or $35. I think it was $35 plus tax, so 39 bucks or something like that. So this is more universal for me. But for all you coffee lovers, you're probably, gonna go with the grinder. But let's see how fine we could get it with just having this. So for measuring up the espresso beans, all I did was use a little cup that comes with the DeLonghi, and this should be equivalent to 1 shot. So put 2 of those in the jar to make a 2-shot setup. Before we had just purchased this, what we do is buy the beans from Starbucks, not Pete's but Starbucks, and then we would have them grind it really fine to espresso, and then we would put it in this container which is airtight, and basically try to preserve the flavor as long as possible. But as you can see, a lot of people like it from the bean because you get more pure extract from it, so it's supposed to be a better taste. But for all those who can't, you could just buy it like this and have them grind the whole bag. So all you do is tighten up the lid, make sure you align it. There's an indicator mark here with the unlock position. You drop that in and then you twist it till it locks. So let's see how fast we could get this to a powder. So that's about 5 seconds, and it crushed it up. Not to a powder yet, but it's fine granules. So one thing I noticed is 2 shots, it kind of shoots it out to the side. So it might actually be better if you have like more than 2 shots. So if you prepare for maybe a few days at a time, it might be better because it'll actually stack it up and keep feeding it. So with the speed of this, it's actually flinging it out to the side, but it does grind it pretty good. You might just have to lean it to one side just so it keeps funneling down. So this is what the Starbucks coffee looks like, and as you can see, they have an unground bean still left in there. And then here's what the blender basically did within a minute. So this is what it looks like up close. Between the two, can you tell the difference? That's what it looks like up close. Can you tell which one's which? So this is the one from the blender, and this is the one from Starbucks. This one does have a little bit of a grainy, like a sand feel to it. Not quite as coarse as sand. And this one's about the same, but a little bit finer. Like you could feel a little bit of difference, but not a lot. If I keep running this, I'm pretty sure I could get it to look like that within another minute of running it. Or if I had more beans in there at once, it would definitely get a lot finer. But from the naked eye looking at it, like they're super close. What I end up doing is filling this up with hot water and soap. If you decide you need to use it for, say, other things, if you're not just using it for coffee and you're gonna make smoothies or whatever and you gotta keep it clean, if you decide you're just using it for coffee, then of course it's probably fine, even the coffee grounds in there for a week at a time or whatever. But I like all my stuff clean, so what I'm going to do is just leave the hot water in there and then pulsate it, and you'll see it mix it and clean it out. So just like that, I cleaned it. You want to make sure when you twist this off that you have this tight enough onto this where it doesn't untwist this and all the water goes everywhere. So after dumping it out and rinsing it, it's as good as new. So super quick way to clean these jars if you can't fit your fingers in there or hand, or if you don't have one of those jar or cup tools to scrub it. It looks like a toilet cleaner, then this is a quick way to do it. So I picked up a new portafilter setup, and basically it's a wood handle, aluminum, stainless. One thing I noticed is the width of these ears here are a little bit smaller or shorter than the width of the old ears on the old setup. So I'd say about 1/4 of an inch it's missing. So when you go and tighten this, instead of it being straight, it's going to be a little bit past straight just because the ears aren't as long. But as long as it doesn't leak around the rim, it's fine. So you basically have all these to filter out your coffee or extract your coffee, whereas this one, yeah, it looks like you have 2, but when you take this all apart, you got 2 in there, but you only got 1 hole where it drips out of, and then your screen has all the holes. One thing I didn't like about this one is when you go and extract the coffee, it wouldn't always extract if you tamped it down with the tamper too hard, or if you just put a little bit of pressure and you didn't break up the coffee grounds. Sometimes it wouldn't extract, so that's an issue. So what I did was I took a small drill bit and opened up that hole. So I took the smallest drill bit I had in my set and then just made that hole a little bit better, or a little bit bigger, and it did increase the performance of this. Less clogging for sure, so keep that in mind. And all these are open, so that was hindering the flow. So all I did was take a drill bit, the smallest drill bit I had, drill all the way through, take a little bit larger one, and then just barely hit it on top and hit it on the bottom of this, just barely, not a lot of pressure, just to break that edge, just to deburr it, so that way you don't have no burr in there and no metal flakes coming off. Then I washed it off so it's smooth. But doing that little mod definitely helped, so it doesn't plug up anymore. Although you don't want to tamp it down with the tamper unless you break it up still, because these will end up clogging up. Okay, there's more of them here, so at least you'll have less chances of clogging. So I highly recommend at least drilling it out if you're keeping the old setup. It'll save you a lot of headaches and a lot of crappy mornings where you don't get your coffee or your espresso. If you don't have something like this to break up your coffee, I highly recommend it, because this saved the extract on the original portafilter setup when it didn't want to basically extract. Using this, breaking it up before running it into your espresso machine definitely helped. If you are tired of, when you fill this up, you're tired of spillage, make sure you pick up one of these. It helps funnel everything in when you're scooping it in. And if you're tired of cleaning the top up in here, cleaning that out from the espresso, you want to make sure you get one of these for sure, this little puck. It's heavy duty, it's thick, and basically what you'll do with this is once you fill that up, you just set this on top, and it keeps any of that espresso from going up into your espresso machine. Alright, so one thing we noticed with this is they do have larger funnel ones where this angle is way out here in this area, and they might be a little bit different in width here. One thing we noticed with this one is if you put it on there, you can't really do anything besides mix it up like that. You can't tamp it down through here because the thickness of this is smaller than the diameter of the tamper that came with the DeLonghi. So keep that in mind. You might need a smaller tamper, and it's just slightly undersized, or you might just need to grind the end of that just to make that diameter smaller, because as you can see, it will not fit past the neck. So if you look right here, it's super close right there. So once we use this to kind of break up the chunks, Then we use this just to barely press down and tamp it so that way it flattens everything out nice and smoothly. Keep in mind this cup might be a little bit deeper than the stock one because the stock one doesn't have straight walls. It kind of tapers in and then drops down and then tapers in again. This one basically goes straight down to the bottom. So if you look, it's like straight, whereas the stock one, it kind of tapers off. So I don't know if this is a little bit larger than 2 shots, but keep that. Okay, so now that the grounds are in, we just place this filter over the top so nothing touches the top of the brewing area. So this is what it looks like once it's done with the extract, and now it just continuously drips. It's kind of made for that because you got this grate down there, but this is the espresso. It's not a professional extraction. I mean, we're not professionals, so we just extract enough to get the flavor. But this definitely has a better result than the stock setup. This is what it looks like after just a quick rinse. No soap, no nothing, just hot water and dump. This is what it looks like after hot water and dump. So super fast to clean, definitely faster than the old one. We want to install this frother, and basically what you need to do is make sure you take out the water cartridge. So start by removing this so that way you don't spill it, or at least make sure it's empty. And then we'll come down and start by removing these 2 Phillips screws, which you're going to need a screwdriver. So if you have a shorter one of these, like a little stubby, it's going to work better than this because you're going to have to fit it in this area, okay, to take out that one and that one. So before we start, what we want to do is remove this. It gives you a little bit more clearance for your number 2 screwdriver if you have a longer one. And then remove this just so that stuff doesn't fall out when you tilt it back. So if for whatever reason you're having an issue with water extraction, like just dripping out naturally without the basket on there, you could take your stubby Phillips screwdriver, remove this screw, and this shell piece will just pop out. So it's just a shell. It's kind of hard to see, but it's basically this with a rim all the way around it. This just pops out by itself, and then you could clean this out just like your portafilter that extracts your espresso. And this might get clogged up if you don't run a screen on top of your basket where the espresso will actually, you know, push up in there maybe, just like it pushes into these crevices here if you don't have a screen on top. And if you're running dirty water like sink water or something, you might get some calcium buildup in. Okay, so what you need to do now is pull off this knob. Just pull it straight off. I already start prying on it before, so yours is going to be a little bit tougher to pull off at the beginning, but what you want to do is pull on the handle and support this face as you pull on it, and this whole thing will pop out. You're going to want a flat blade, something as thin as possible. So if you could get something that's thinner than this flat blade size, I definitely recommend it because this was borderline a little too big. But basically what I did was I put this in here like this and kind of wedged it, and as I wedged it I was pulling back on this, so I was pushing in this direction. Once I got this started, I twisted the screwdriver like this to the side, so like that, and then I moved down, did the same, and that kind of pushed it forward a little bit. But in doing so, I was also trying to aid this faceplate as well and pull it forward at the same time I was twisting and prying, so that way you could get this front cover off. So if you look at the bottom here, this one's stainless, so if you have the black one, you might mar this, just kind of like how I marred this area, just because it's plastic. So keep that in mind when doing this. There's a tab here, and then you also needed to remove the bottom screws that were under here, the 2 that were under there, which we already removed. and this whole faceplate comes off. So to kind of lift up this whole thing, basically what you want to do is take out the screw that's here and here with your Phillips screwdriver, which removes that whole thing. Then you want to come over here and kind of pry forward and up, and as you pry forward and up, you'll also be able to just work the side all the way around until you're able to get this whole thing to lift up and out. So if you look back here in the corner, there's a slot there, and then you're also given 2 tabs. So a tab there, and the same thing on this side, another tab here that's locked into these back slots. So that's why I said make sure you lift it up and work your way around the side, work your way around this side, and then this will pop forward and up. Okay, and that kind of gives you a little bit more access to this whole unit inside. And this isn't also limited to replacing the steam one. If you need to like inspect anything, like if you think that there's a clog in your system, you could look at the watering, the water tubes, and then also the steam area if you think the steam wand is not working properly. So all that stuff is accessible once you get, or accessible once you get this off, and then you could unplug these wires here if you need to get a little bit closer and this stuff gets in your way. So just make sure you take pictures of where things go. And like this one here, it's an open circuit right there, or open tab. That's not used, so don't be weary if you notice something's missing or you think something's missing. Depending on your machine, you might have some differences in here. But one thing I noticed is this clamp here is like a tamper-proof clamp, or clamps that they put on your radiator for your car. So it requires a special tool to get that off. I'm gonna have to use some needle nose and get it out, but just be aware that that might be a bottleneck for you. Here's an up close of the one on the top. So it's not like a hose clamp, just like a regular hose clamp with a Phillips. It actually has like a locking mechanism. So if you look closely, there's like a little tab or an ear that's bent down into it. So that might be problematic for you. Let me turn on the light. Can I give you a little bit better look? Okay. So to access this area a little bit closer, you could take out the 4 screws here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th screw. So there is actually 5. So the 5th screw is that one, which is for this location, and it will allow you to remove this whole thing or lift it up. Your heating element here and move it over to the side, kind of out of the way. One tip is when doing any of this stuff, look at where things are located and how it actuates. So if I turn this, you'll notice that this little tab rotates. So when you turn it straight in the off position, this tab is straight across at a stop, just so you know how to reinsert this later on. So make sure everything's in the off position, and then you're able to pull this stuff out. So kind of hard to do it with one hand, but pull on that stuff, and then you'll notice that this is in the horizontal position when this is in the horizontal position, just so it's easy to put back. And then you'll notice that there's a little tab here, or notch, that's in this horizontal position. So this is what it looks like once you're able to get it pushed back and this removed from the side. You have this little thing where this is a spacer, just like these are spacers for when the screws and stuff bolt down to this. You got this little ball, you got a C-clip, and then you got this clip right here that holds the hose. So the C-clip, you could use a flat blade or whatever just to slide it out, and that takes care of that. That restrains your little frother. But what's holding it up and what's going to hinder a lot of people from doing this modification is that that tubing clamp. Okay, so I recommend, if you get it off, to put a just a regular hose clamp with the Phillips on it, and I'll do that. But just keep in mind, this is going to be the hardest part. So you could clip it with like a Dremel tool, just cut it across there. You could cut the line if you have high temp tubing to replace that, which I don't recommend because it might be a metric tubing, so keep that in mind. But those are all options. Just make sure you cut it around. If you decide to cut it, you cut it right here on top where this shackle is, so that way you don't nick the hose, or you finagle with it to get it off. So when doing this, what you want to do is hold this right here and twist it from side to side like this, right? So clockwise, counterclockwise, as you're holding onto this tube here and pulling up on it, and that'll allow it to slide off once you get this clip here removed. I'll show you up close a view of it and the tools I used and how I used it to get it off. But this clamp needs to come off because it has a lip on the top of this tube, which prohibits that from sliding straight off. So this is what the clip looks like up close. Okay, that little indentation in there, that little hole is clipped onto this little lip that was facing down, and it wraps all the way around. That's why I hate these things. But like I said, if you have a Dremel tool, you could cut this off, cut it on this knuckle here, so that way you don't potentially cut into the tube if you cut it in these areas. At least this has a gap here, and then it has this band that wraps around to kind of protect it a little bit, and that will release this band as well. So a little Dremel cutoff wheel should get you through that. But what I used is a combination between these needle nose and these adjustable pliers here. And the way I did it was I basically used these to grip the end here, crimp it, and then twist it, like roll it. So I grabbed the bottom, or this end here, and I twisted it up, I twisted it down, I pulled, tried to come in from the top up here, twist it out, just to bend me a little lip. And then I use these to grab it, because these have way more clamping force. Grabbed onto it, and then I rotated it out. Keep in mind when you're doing this, this spins around the tube, so you gotta kind of hold it here with your finger, or use another pair of clamps or something to keep this from rotating around the tube, because all it wants to do is spin once you start relieving the clamping strength on it. So to get this little E clip or C clip off of here, where this little groove is down here, I use these really thin needle nose to fit in between the gap, and I pulled it straight out. Okay, you could do the same thing with the larger ones. You're just going to have to finesse it a little bit more, or you could use a flat blade to stick in there and kind of rotate it out as well. It's just going to take a little bit of finagling if you don't have the proper tool. So to get this piece out of here, basically this is in there, so once that E clip comes out, you could just slide this straight off, because it's going to be in there like this. Okay, and you want to pull up on that, and then this falls out, and then this is what the piece looks like up close. In case you want to find something more similar to this, here's an up close view of it. Now to prep this one for use, we got to get rid of this nut, unless you just want it dangling there. But to remove the nut, undo this, so take this all the way out, and then slide this rubber straight out. So once you remove the nozzle, you need to slide this rubber piece off. This just pulls off. Okay, some of them might be a little bit tougher than this one, so maybe some water or whatever as you're pulling, just to lubricate this, or some dish liquid soap as you're pulling this, just to allow this to slide off. And then you can remove this whole thing, including this little washer here, because you're not going to need the washer, you're not going to need the nut, none of this stuff. Okay, so one thing you need to do is basically from the nozzle tip, not this tip, but from the nozzle tip, make sure you put it in this orientation and slide this all the way up to the top. So it's going to take a lot of finessing, but as you can see, it should make its way around these 90s. So this is what it looks like right here. Okay, so this is what it should look like when you're starting to get it back to the assembly stage. So when doing this modification, I did notice, if you look closely, that little spout sticking up next to that little dome. is a lot shorter than the original one. So the original one is this distance here. Even though you have all this is for the C-clip and all that stuff. But the actual clamping area is this area, but it also has a barb. So if you're looking to do this, maybe even try to find one where that sticks up a little bit more than, say, a 3/8 of an inch, just to give you a little bit more clamping area. I'm going to use a hose clamp to really bite down on that. Just keep that in mind, because this is steam that's coming out of there, so it's gonna, you know, build up. But since it's an open flow tube, it shouldn't have any back pressure, which means it shouldn't blow this off. All your pressure's in here. Once this valve opens up to let your steam out in this area, then it should just be a straight shot. So there should be nothing that puts back pressure on this tube to blow it off anyway. Make sure when you're using the wand, you don't have this end plugged up, like with debris or anything, or like pressed up against the cup all the way at the bottom, because that might create a little bit of back pressure, which could in turn push this up, because it's going to build up pressure in this tube, especially because you don't have a lip. But crank down on that pipe clamp and it should hold it. But just to be preventative, make sure you don't block any of these spouts. The tips that it comes with is a pinhole one in the center, and then one with 3 holes. It might be a good idea to run the one with 3 holes, so that way it cannot plug up, because you'll always have 1 hole open or 2 holes open, and it's gonna create, it might create a little bit back pressure because you have, you know, a tip that's pressurizing, but it shouldn't be enough to blow this out. So just keep that in mind. Just be safe with this, especially if you have a short little nipple sticking up where you're gonna put the pipe clamp on. So I found a small hose clamp. Okay, so this one's tiny. I don't know, this is probably like 1/2 inch in diameter or something like that, maybe 3/4 of an inch in diameter. I recommend getting good quality ones. This one here in particular is ideal. Don't buy the cheap stuff from China. What ends up happening is when you tighten them down super tight, this strips out and it starts kind of arching these, and it won't tighten anymore, and then basically it'll be useless. Okay, so this is what it should look like. The pipe or the hose clamp facing parallel to this face, when this is at a 90-degree angle, perpendicular to this face, so that way you have proper range of movement here, and then also so it could articulate down if you want it to go down and then up. Okay. One thing I want to stress here is when you insert this tube, you want to make sure you get it right over the top of that little bump. So you want to push that tube all the way down over the top of this and then into this area, because this little short piece here on the new one is not long enough to keep a clamp on. With the silicone hose, it actually just slid off. Even though I tightened it super tight, it slid off. So make sure it gets over that, and then you could tighten it, your hose clamp on this. But I don't trust it just being tightened on that little thing without having a little lip on it. Okay, so make sure you get your hose far enough down, and I'm gonna tell you this up front, this is the hardest part of everything. I thought it was going to be this tube getting that little bushing on, but this piece right here, trying to get this tube up and over that little ball down there, the ball that looks like this, the little ledge, getting it up and over and slid down is a pain in the butt, because this tube is so short and you got to navigate it through this. So that's an issue. If you don't have this style clamp here, then I suggest you to take this one off and just slide this whole thing out and do it out in the open. But since I have this, I would need 2 hose clamps to clamp this one again. But this might be really bulky in this area, because you have this hose here which you can move out of the way, but you're limited in space here, so it would be really close. So if you could get a smaller hose clamp, I would definitely recommend that. So this one's about, I'd say 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and I would probably recommend doing like something like 1/2 inch or smaller, like 3/8 if you can, just to get that thing clipped on. A zip tie will not work, so don't even try using a zip tie. You need something that's going to really bind this silicone hose together. So what I did was I used my needle nose here, gripped on the sheath here as far back as I could get it like this, and used the buildup in this area as I was pushing down to help slide it over. But I probably spent like 30 minutes trying to get this thing up and over this. Okay, it does help to put a screw in here, of course, to lock this down when you start tightening up your hose clamp, just to keep this from moving. But it is a really tight fit and a hassle. It's not an easy do, so make sure that you're willing to sacrifice the time and potentially mess up to the point where you might just have to buy a longer silicone hose, just to replace this one to give you more access to this area if you tear the silicone, because gripping it with the needle nose might tear it if you're too harsh on it. So hopefully mine didn't tear and it works out. But so far so good. Now that I have this inserted, it's able to kind of maneuver. One thing is it doesn't feel as stout as the original one, and that might be because this was longer and the leverage of this was different than that little short piece. So that could be, but keep that in mind, is it might feel a little easier to maneuver. But got that in. Now I'm going to start assembling this whole thing, and I'm not going to run this right now without this cover on, because if this is leaking, I don't want any of that hot water to shoot out. So make sure you have the cover on like this. You can leave the top off just so you could see in there, but make sure that this isn't exposed, because you don't want that hot water shooting everywhere if you did cut into this because you were using sharp needle nose like I am and it dug into it. Okay? I do recommend replacing this hose if you're having troubles with that, or just go ahead and order a new hose for the diameter of this. This is probably like, I don't know, 1/4 inch in diameter, so you want to make sure the OD of that hose is at least this diameter before getting into this if you're really serious about doing this mod, because I foresee people having a lot of issues trying to get all this hooked up. Okay, it was really hard on me, and I have the tools to kind of get in there, but I do have larger hands, so this area limited to this rotation of moving this hot end up, you know, kind of, I had a small space to work with. So if you got smaller hands, or if you're willing to take all these parts off, take pictures, and you could go ahead and do that, and that would definitely make it a lot easier. Got the top lid back on, so basically you slide this down in here like this and make sure these two taps pop in. If they don't, you might want to just, you know, tap it a little, and then it's a super snug fit, so you actually got to kind of push it down and get them to pop in, and then the fronts just pop in on their own. And then remember, you got these two screws you got to put in. But what I think I'm going to do is leave it open like this to test it now, just in case any hot water squirts out. At least I'm kind of shielded by this, it doesn't shoot out this way, and I could inspect for any leaks in there. Also, another thing I want to mention that's probably worth mentioning is this tube. You want it to go on this side of the boss. So you see the boss sticking down from this cover that goes into a screw hole. You don't want it to wrap around the back side, and the reason for that is because it'll actually stiffen this up a little bit for you, so it's just not, you know, loose. So as you can see now, it kind of stays in its spot. When it gets to here, it kind of wants to twist in there, but I'd rather have it facing forward than wanting to go back. Okay, and then also up and down, everything's moves nicely, but I'm able to kind of rotate this a little bit more and keep it up forward out of the way, and then you can even tuck it in because the friction of this sheathing on there kind of holds it. If you prefer it to be back here, then by all means, you know, you could route it to the back, or you could push this tube down and away like that. It kind of holds it pushing in that direction, and as you can see, it kind of slid it to the back. Now it wants to just swing backwards. But from my observation, I mean, most people probably want it around this area anyway. One thing you're going to have to do is insert the knobs again. You don't have to push them all the way in, just as long as they move and click, just to kind of get things activated and see. Make sure you stay away from the electrical. Make sure all your plugs are plugged or pushed in and they didn't disconnect. If you disconnected them, make sure you inspect them or have taken pictures to plug them back into their proper spots. So make sure the water's in there, close it up, and then of course you could use this as a reference. So you could basically turn on your machine, make sure it's plugged in first, and then run it that way. Okay, so we got the red light for on and the green light that it's ready. Now let's turn it over to steam. Okay, so it clicks over to steam, and then now we should be able to activate the steamer. As you can see, it's steaming. I don't have a tip on it right now, but it is steaming. Turn that off and then check in here for any leaks. And it looks like we are clean. We have no water dripping at all. Let's make sure we knock on wood. But as you can see, everything's working good. No leaks on the top. No leaks anywhere. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to move these wires away from that little clip. Just up and out of the way, because that clip might get hot through the tube when it's allowing, you know, when this valve clicks on to allow the steam to go through. But we are green again, so we'll run the steam. And it's still green, so now it just clicks off, so we know that it needs to heat back up. But overall, I think I'm pretty satisfied with that. Okay, so one thing I did was I pulled up this zip tie from way back there. It kind of slid down. They didn't anchor it that good. There's one back there, but then I think this one was supposed to be up here. And I just slid it all the way up and tightened it up a little bit. Keep in mind, that piece right there, that brass piece, is super hot. So don't touch any of this metal area, these components, because it will burn you, especially if you ran a test. And make sure all of these wires are away from the boiler and that thing right there and the little stud, because they're super hot. You can feel the heat coming off of them. So everything that's actually touching it is encased in the silicone tube to keep it from melting the wire. Okay, so I did measure this tube and it is about 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and then plus you got the thickness of the tube on the silicone jacket and then the silicone tube itself, which you're probably looking at like 3/8 of an inch. So you at least need a 1/2 inch or 3/8 of an inch to for the clamp if you want something a little bit smaller. Like I said, I think mine's like 3/4 of an inch. Anyways, I did put the tip on. This is the single tubed one, so this one's just straight. I didn't put the three hole one right there. Didn't put that one in yet. So I'm just going to try this and see what it looks like. So one thing I noticed with this setup for the steam wand is it is a 90 degree. The original one had that little plastic or rubberized tip or silicone tip, which if you're trying to get it to create a vortex or a whirlpool, this one has no give. Whereas when you took off that tube, you could kind of flex it to be on the side of the cup and it would create a whirlpool effect. So if you're trying to get that effect out of this, you might want to look at the other brands that are available where this is like at a 45 degree or something like that. It's slightly kicked out past 90. So you could actually create that vortex if you're worried about how this is just going to blow straight down and then throw your milk everywhere. That's why I have this larger glass versus this smaller one, because this one actually was shooting it straight out versus this one it's wider, so it's allowing the milk to kind of circulate a little bit easier, because I was able to tilt it and kind of manipulate it like this. So now we're going to try the 3-hole one. So that's going to complete today's video on the Portafilter Upgrade and the headaches of putting in a different steam wand. But the actual product that you get at the end of the day is definitely worth the upgrade if you're willing to deal with some of the frustrations. Just be safe when doing the steam wand and be prepared for whatever your machine has internally in store for you, because the black machine versus the stainless machine does have different clips in the way it houses the milk frother. But that's going to complete today's video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It's greatly appreciated. If you want to see content like this and other content I'll be posting in the near future, consider subscribing. Until next time, I'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks for watching.